and welcome to another episode of the Hey Girl podcast. We're your hosts, Bethany
and Laurie Casagrande.
And each week, we get to share with you stories from women of all ages and stages of life who are following Jesus right where they're at.
Our prayer is that each story encourages you to run your race in your place. Real talk. I've never met Brittany Crosby, and I actually haven't heard her podcast yet. So, Bethany, you gotta forgive me this week. You're gonna have to give me everything that's about to come in just a little snapshot so we have a taste.
Okay, first of all, there's no way I can capture Brittany in just a snapshot because she's amazing. Second of all, I'm cutting your pay.
In half.
Oh, yeah.
Half of zero.
Definitely in half. Third of all, I thought, you know what? If I was just going to give you a little glimpse to kind of whet your appetite to go and listen to her story and then, more importantly, stalk her on Instagram like I do, like a creep, I kind of thought I should just give you some favorite quotes that I grabbed off of her Instagram. Are you ready? Brittany is a wealth of information. And sometimes it's like, honestly, really deep and powerful. And other times I laugh out loud. And we need that on Instagram. We need that on social media. And so Brittany is one of these places you can go and get all of the things that are great about social media in one spot.
Okay, I'm sold.
Okay, you ready? Here's our first one. Just in case no one told you today, you're beautiful, you're kind, I love you, and you have a nice butt.
It's like she already knows us.
I know, right? Okay, here's another one. Surround yourself with people who make you feel like your phone battery is at 2% and you just found a charger.
Woo! Recharge.
I love that. Surround yourself with great people.
Where does she find these things?
I don't know. She's a genius. Here, I really enjoyed this one. Tell me I can't do something, I'll do it twice and take pictures. This was like my handstand this week. We're kindred spirits.
Aww.
Okay, and this one actually totally brought me back to my own childhood, and this is my favorite. Why are 14-year-olds skipping the ugly, awkward stage? Put down the contour kit and use a foundation 3 shades darker than your skin, wear blue mascara, and put on some glitter lip gloss. It's tradition.
Blue mascara. I love it. It reminds me of, what was that movie? My Girl?
Oh, yes.
Blue Shadow, I believe it was.
It's a story for another time, but truth be told, I definitely thought that foundation a few shades darker would make me look tan when I was in middle school.
Oh, we all have our mistakes.
It was really bad. I'm so glad there aren't photos to haunt me. But here's the thing. What you need to know about Brittany is I did not know her before somebody linked me to her Instagram account. And ever since I started following her, reading her story, and then now especially after talking to her, she is by far one of the most inspirational human beings I have ever met. She's only 28 years old. And if we talk about this whole thing about running your race in your place, this girl like epitomizes that mission statement, because the race that she's been placed in and what's in front of her is stinking hard, and she's not letting it beat her. Like, she is racing. She's racing ahead. She's keeping her eyes fixed on Jesus, and everything that she's facing and the things that are in her life, she's doing this amazing job of pointing people back to Jesus. And so you're definitely going to want to listen to the episode because it's going to change you.
I cannot wait any longer. My appetite is wet. My mouth is watering. It's time. Listeners, get ready for this week's guest,
Brittany Crosby. All right, girls, I am here with my kind of newish friend, Brittany Crosby. First time I've seen you face to face, but girlfriend, I am like stalking you on Instagram like a creep. So would you like to say hey to the listeners?
Hi. You're so funny.
In a creepy kind of way, I know. I always like to tell a story. Yours is a little unique. I don't even know if I've shared this with you. You were not a direct, like someone came and said, interview Brittany. What you were I was somebody on my Instagram, and now I'm going to space on who, tagged your page and was like, if you're not following this girl in her story, then you need to do it now. And I'm calling this like Holy Spirit moment, because I see those a lot and I'm such a snob. Like I rarely am like, oh, I'll go jump over there, because I don't need one more reason to like spend more time on Instagram. But I just had this like nudge and was like, I'm going to go check out this girl's story, and clicked on the link and started reading your story, and was in tears like pretty quickly. I mean, I'm a crier, I'm a feeler, but just was so moved and encouraged and blessed by not just your story, but how you have used your platform and social media, your relationships, everything else, to just not just share your story, but share about your faith and what God is doing, and to bring hope in the midst of something that can otherwise feel very scary. I loved it from the moment that I started following. And so like a creep, I followed, and then I immediately reached out and I was like, hey, so you don't know me at all. And you were so sweet to write back, and you're like, yeah, I would totally come on the podcast. So here we are. It's crazy to me.
Here we are. Oh my gosh. And for you to tell me that, like, thank you so much, because it's not always easy to share your story, especially when sometimes you're like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. But for you to tell me that just gives me so much purpose into what I'm doing, and into my fight, and into the hard parts of my life. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, I know I am just one voice among many, many, I'm sure, that would share very similarly how God's using it. And so the flip side of that is we're going to have a lot of listeners that are like, who is Brittany Crosby? Like, who is this girl? I feel honored that we get to sit down and that we get to air this, and for you to have a voice into that many more lives. And so why don't we just take some time? You can kind of rewind back to the beginning.
For sure. I was born in Georgetown, Texas, which is just north of Austin. And I grew up here my entire life. We didn't move around or anything. We had tons of family vacations over the summer. If you look at my Instagram, you see I love adventure. So that's where that all sparked from. I played sports, soccer and volleyball, and I did dance and running. But I was also super nerdy, as I admitted earlier to you. So I did really well in school also. And I went to A&M Corpus Christi. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I remember sitting there, when they pull you in and they sit you at that desk with the guidance counselor kind of person. I don't know. That person who's person. Yes. Chemo brain. And she's asking me like, okay, what do you want to major in? And I was like, deer in the headlights. I have no idea. And all of the women in my family are teachers or in the school system somehow, things like that. So she's going through the list and I'm like, okay, well, education, that's familiar. We'll do education. I can change it later. And I stuck with that. I never changed it. I liked it. I definitely had a knack for it. So made some of my best friends going to school there. Going to school at the beach was really cool, but for only like 6 months. And then I was ready to be done. So I graduated in 3.5 years. But during that time, after a few rough years and poor choices and rough relationships, which I know is a common theme among just American women. Yeah. I started dating Reese, my now husband. We actually met each other in 2nd grade. Super cute. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, you married your elementary sweetheart. But that's only kind of the truth, because he didn't know he was my elementary sweetheart at the time. I actually got busted later when my brother pulled out I think it was my 4th or 5th grade yearbook, and there's like hearts around Reese and stuff. It's super embarrassing or cute. I can't decide which one, but
well, now that you're married, it's adorable. If he'd married someone else, it'd be weird.
It's not creepy, right?
Yeah.
But no, I was that girl on the playground who like played sports with all the boys and ran around the track with all of them. So, we were friends in elementary, middle, and high school, but never dated until we were in college. He went to Texas Tech and I went to Corpus. So I really think God has a sense of humor, that we live in the same town our entire lives and don't date until we're 13 hours apart. So yeah, that was fun. Yeah. So I started dating Reese at the end of my college career, I guess. Started fitness instructing, which was kind of the little caveat into what I'm doing now. But I graduated in 3.5 years, moved to Lubbock to be with Reese after that, and got my first job, not as a teacher, but as an aide. And I made $600 a month in that, by the way, after taxes and retirement and all that. So Reese and I had fun living on very, very small amounts of money. So after that, I got my first big girl teaching job in Lubbock. And at first I thought that I was just having a rough time teaching, that even though I was good at it, that like, oh, everyone struggles this much in their first year. Like everyone hates it their first year. Like, like I loved my kids, but I didn't feel called to teach, I think was the problem. And I had so much guilt with that, because you see other teachers and you're like, wow, like, this is your dream job. You're doing such a good job. And it's like, I'm putting my all into this and it just does not feel right. I eventually realized that my guilt wasn't from me not feeling called. My guilt was from me feeling like I was taking somebody else's spot who it was their dream.
Wow.
And when I realized that, I was like, okay, I've got to do something about this, because it's not only affecting me, it's affecting whose spot that I'm in, who should be here. And so I started online fitness coaching on the side, because I didn't have time to go back to being an instructor, because also instructors make zilch. So just being honest about that, and there are bills to be paid. So I couldn't do that. And plus with teaching, I mean, I was at work by like 6:30 in the morning, staying till 6:30 at night. So I didn't have time to do anything else. But I started this on the side. Before that, I was super into CrossFit and running half marathons, doing all that for a while. But I also still had a really negative body image, particularly from choices I made in college and just not really like truly taking care of myself. I hated the way I felt in my own skin, didn't have confidence. I'd go shopping and buy all the things, and then you go in your closet and you're like, I hate this. Like, I don't, I don't
have nothing to wear.
Yeah, literally, you're like looking at your like 87 shirts and you're like, I have nothing to wear. And I hated that. And I knew that God had more for me. Like, that's not how he wanted me to live my life. He didn't want me to hate the body he had given me and to feel so bad about myself, and insert my friend Maggie. So I met Maggie 2 years before this on my honeymoon in Mexico. So Reese and I got married a year and a half after we started dating, and we went to Mexico to an all-inclusive resort where we end up meeting our friends Josh and Maggie, who were there on their first anniversary, who are still our best friends to this day, 6 years later.
That's so fun.
So yeah, we met, we hung out the whole time, played a ridiculous amount of beach volleyball.
Okay, that's weird. You hung out the whole time.
We did, I know.
It's your honeymoon.
I'm like, well, oh well. No, but we had a great time. Like, Josh is absolutely my husband's best friend, and it's incredible. They lived in Alaska at the time. So
well, of course they're your best friends. You guys honeymooned together. It's like, bonded for life.
Right? But yeah, so 2 years after this, Maggie, I start seeing her doing this like fitness stuff. And I'm like, man, I am like CrossFitting and running for hours a day. Like, why don't I feel as happy as she is? Like, why am I not seeing results like she is? And she was like, well, girl, you should just be a coach with me. And I was like, nah, I'm not about that. And so for a few months, she just kept saying like, okay, I know you'd love it. Like, I know you'd love it. And finally, my husband was like, okay, either do it or stop talking about it. Like, and so I was like, okay, I literally have nothing to lose. Let's go for it. So I started doing that on the side. And I mean, you know this, but I'll just say this for all the listeners, that I partner with a company called Beachbody and did that on the side while teaching. And it actually made me so pumped to wake up at 4:45 in the morning, which I didn't think was a thing. I'm like, no, that's the middle of the night. But I would get up, I would get some of my work done for coaching. I would do my workout and then go to work at school.
That's a commitment.
Sometimes I look back and I'm like, okay, 6:30 feels super early now. And then I even get to stay home all day. Like, how did I do 4:45? But no, it was so worth it because it made me a better wife, a better friend, a better daughter, a better teacher. And about 14 or 15 months after I started, I was able to put my resignation in for teaching. I stayed the entire school year. I didn't leave till the summer. I didn't want to do that to my kiddos. But it just had eventually come a time where it just made more sense for me to spend all of my time coaching. And there was so much fulfillment in that I didn't miss that fulfillment piece from teaching. And I also was like, okay, now somebody who teaching is their dream, now they can go do their dream because I'm following mine. And to quit teaching did not make sense in my mind at all. I was like, oh my gosh, people are going to think I'm crazy. My parents are like, what are you doing? Like, you're working online? Like, what is all this? They supported me, but it was just like a weird thing for people to think that like I went to school for all that time to go do this. And now I'm like, all right, bye. But I felt God's nudge. It was just like, this is not going to make sense, but I need you to do it. I remember standing at my principal's door and I was like, no, I can't knock. No, it's like that scene in Frozen where they're like, does she even know how to knock?
Yes. Yes.
Just knock. So I did. I put my resignation in. It was hard, but I just remember going for it and feeling that total peace that comes when you're obedient, even when it doesn't make sense. And it was literally the most scary and liberating thing I have ever done. I knew that it was God's purpose for me to do that, but I thought it was for me to like be a stay-at-home mom or go full-time travel or something like that. Little did I know what he had in store for me, which unfortunately is not as fun as what I thought it was going to be. Just being real there. But 4 months later, after that, I started not feeling well. Reese and I had gone on a little weekend getaway, and I had like one glass of wine, one beer with him, and then like a piece of pizza. I woke up the next day feeling like I had like quadruple that. And I'm like, what is wrong? I guess like I am just not used to this anymore. Like my stomach doesn't handle this. I ate super healthy before. So I'm like, all right, it's the pizza, I just don't feel well. I'll feel better tomorrow. Well, then day after day, it didn't get better, kept getting worse. And I'm like, this isn't, a pizza hangover. Something's not right. So I started going to the doctor and I'm just like, something is wrong. Something is wrong. And they could not figure it out. They scanned my gallbladder. They told me that I needed to cut out dairy. So I did. Felt better for maybe a week. And then they're like, okay, well, maybe also cut out gluten. So I went gluten-free, started feeling a little better. Then it would come. But every time I would cut something out, it would come back. And I'm like, okay, like that helps, but we're just putting Band-Aids on a bigger issue here. I went to several doctors, one of which sent me to the hospital in an ambulance thinking that I had a blood clot in my lung or maybe having a heart attack. And yeah, it was just all this crazy stuff. And so many doctors told me that I was crazy. One literally told me, sweetheart, this is all in your head. You need to take the Xanax I prescribed you, please. And I'm like, I am not crazy. I know something is wrong. I know something is wrong and I need somebody to care enough to figure this out. So that was like the beginning of September all the way through Thanksgiving. And eventually when I got to Thanksgiving, I couldn't even eat. I was so bloated and feeling full and just having crazy stomach pain, just so tired. I took my own plate of food to my grandma's house because all I could eat was plain chicken and sweet potatoes. It was so sad. I'm like, how did it get to that point? Then the next week, I spent 4 out of the 5 days in the ER, sent home every time saying there's nothing wrong with you. And the last time I was finally like, I am not going home. I refuse to leave this hospital until you figure out what's wrong with me. And so I made them give me a room. My husband said this, they kind of rolled their eyes at me, and my husband was like, no, she's not leaving. And when they still tried to push us out, my dad was there, and he was like, no, we're really not leaving. Like, we're staying here.
Good
so
I
got a room, and because I'm like, you're sending me home every night, and every night I come back. And I mean, I'm not, a sissy. I tolerate a lot of pain, and this is not okay. They finally gave me a room. And then this is kind of where the 2 weeks of my life that I don't remember comes in. I was on a lot of pain meds, a lot of nausea meds, all very, very fuzzy. But I knew that they were starting to run tests a lot faster. I was hooked up to, I couldn't eat. I couldn't even hold water down. So I was hooked up to all sorts of different monitors and machines and feeding me through an IV and a tube up my nose. It was not fun. Finally, after 2 weeks, after more tests and tests were all run, and all of them were stat. And while you do want to find out results really fast, you don't want to have to be a stat everything in a hospital. We knew that it was not going to be good, but never once did I see this coming. Never once. Because I had been constantly told over and over, you have nothing life-threatening. You have nothing life-threatening. You're fine. You have nothing life-threatening. And so I thought it was going to be something like celiac, or they thought it maybe was bacteria I had picked up from hiking in Colorado. They thought just a couple other different things. It was okay, that'll be really hard, but it'll be fine. The third gastro doctor that I was seeing, because that's what all my symptoms were, 110% GI. He came in the room and he was he said, is all your family here? And I was like, I don't think so. And my mother-in-law started to call all of them. My husband, of course, had left that one day to go to work. So he came back. My dad came. His work is right across the street from the hospital. And so they all get there. And they're not in my room for a while. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess maybe they're not all here yet. I'm talking to my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, and we're just kind of lightheartedly chatting. And then all of a sudden, my doctor walks in and everyone's filing in behind him, and I'm searching their faces why won't anybody look at me? Nobody is making eye contact with me. So they all come quietly, sit around the room, and my doctor's on one side and my husband's on the other. They're both holding my hands, and I'm like, all right, brace yourself, girlfriend. Something is about to happen. And so he sat me down and he said, sweetheart, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you have cancer. And it was the weirdest thing. I mean, you would think that I would just collapse into a puddle and that it would just be devastation. But I think at that point I was so sick that it was almost relief. That it was okay, now we know what to fight. Now we know what to do. What do we do about this now?
Yeah.
And so he said, well, we're getting a game plan together, and we'll have that for you in the next day. And so he escorted my whole family out besides my husband, and Reese laid there in the bed with me, and we blasted Lauren Daigle's Trust in You. Yes. So loud, probably disturbed the people next door, but it's nope, this is what I need. And it's now tattooed on my arm, by the way, if you didn't see. We played that, and there was just this okay, now we know. I know what to fight. And it was in that moment that I then realized why God had me quit my teaching job. And it was just okay, you were setting me up to be able to go to all of these doctor's appointments and to not have to ask off of work and to be laying here in this stupid hospital bed, but not having to worry about anything other than the task at hand, which was fighting for my life. And after that, I couldn't be around crowds during chemo, feeling like junk throughout that. I could do that from my own couch and not have to write sub-plans or worry about what was happening with that. And I mean, honestly, my job now as a fitness coach, I love it. And people are like, why do you keep working throughout treatment and all this? Like, why don't you just stop? And I'm like, okay, treatment and cancer and all the symptoms and side effects are crappy. Doing something that gives you purpose is such a fun distraction. Like, I need that. And so I keep doing that. But got diagnosed, had surgery 24 hours later and started chemo 5 days later. Lost all my hair, of course, thankfully growing back now.
It's adorable. I like the pixie on you.
You know, I would have never cut my hair like this had it not been for this. And I actually don't hate it. I don't think I'll go back super long, but I think I'll go to my
rock it. But... You rock the pixie. I'm just saying.
Oh, thank you.
Pixie girls got to stick together.
Yeah, I know. I'm half tempted to keep it. So maybe like listeners can vote on that or something. I don't know, but
that'd be so fun. We totally need to put a poll, like your old picture with long hair and then you with the pixie.
Yes, we totally need to do that. Oh my gosh, that would be so fun. But yeah, anyways, so lost all my hair, lost all my muscles, came home from the hospital weighing a rock solid 99 pounds. But you know, from day one of diagnosis, I was so determined to not let this steal my joy. I'm like, cancer might take my ability to have kids. It might take my muscles. It might take my hair, but this will not steal my joy at all. Like, I still have life to live. This is just a little part of it, you know, and by little, I mean a lot, but we're going to put it back where it came from. And actually, it was funny. My oncologist told me, he's like, well, you know, I know you're a fitness coach, but you're going to struggle to put muscle back on. Like, just know that. And I'm like, okay, watch me. Obviously,
yes.
You don't know me. Challenge accepted. So
I knew we were meant to be good friends.
I'm like, oh, just tell me I can't do something and I will do it. So
I'm putting muscle on so hard and then I'm coming back and flexing for you.
Yes. That's actually funny. Like at one of my scans, he was like, man, I don't think I've ever had a patient this in shape. Looking at like the outline of my scan, we had a good laugh about that. But yeah, I got cleared to work out, you know, about 2 months after my surgery and just really haven't stopped since. Like that's what kept me going through all that, is it was just blasting worship music and doing my workout, even if I felt like junk. So I went through weekly chemo for 24 straight weeks. Don't recommend that. It's definitely like by far the most like my least favorite thing I've ever done in my life. But after 24 weeks, I was declared NED, which means no evidence of disease. And we celebrated had a huge party because the entire way through chemo, I kept telling my parents and my husband, I was like, I want a big party. I want there to be confetti, champagne, and a dance floor.
Yes.
And they brought it. Oh my gosh. There were so many people. We all had these huge confetti poppers, as much champagne as I wanted. Like we all danced all night. It was so fun. Kind of felt like another like wedding reception. So we celebrated. And then 3 weeks later, started not feeling good. And I was like, So I had graduated to like 3-month appointments, and I texted my nurse, who's become like a third mom to me. I have my mom, my mother-in-law, and then, I have my nurse, Tina. And I was just like, I really don't feel good. Something's wrong. Something's up. And I went in, they did the CA-125 blood test on me, and it had doubled. And I was like, okay. Which didn't mean that it was back, but it meant that it probably was. And so we were like, you know what? Just continue enjoying life for another month, and we're going to test it again. Because there's nothing on your CT. There's nothing on your PET. Like, let's just see. So then another 3 weeks goes by, test it again, and it doubled again. And we were like, okay, we don't really like the way this is headed. We'll do another CT. And that's when we saw increased fluid and, a couple other things that my oncologist didn't really like. So he, at that point, was like, you know what? I think you need to go to MD Anderson. And never in a million years do you ever think that, yourself is going to have to go to the top cancer center in the nation. You never, you hear about it and you're like, man, MD Anderson, oh, that must suck to go there. And then all of a sudden your name is a patient there. And it's rough. But also knowing that they are, one of the best at what they do, also reassured me. So we headed there. My doctor there just continued monitoring me, eventually put me on like a hormone blocker pill that caused crazy bad joint pain and all of this, and only worked for about a month. So then switched to another treatment, tried another chemo. And after about 3 or 4 months, found out that was not working. Then I'm chemo resistant, which means that chemo can, buy me time, but it's not likely to be curative ever. And so now kind of brings me to today. I am on a clinical trial for immunotherapy, MD Anderson. So just finished dose number 2 and found out that my number is stable for the first time since I quit chemo. So we're going to take that as a win and just roll forward with it. But yeah, and throughout all these treatments, it's been a long fight so far. I mean, I know there are many others that have been in this longer than I have, but it's been quite a rough road. But throughout it, I'm like, my husband, he's made this like going to treatment almost a fun adventure. Like we'll play, our like 90s jams in the car on the way there. Cause before it was a 45-minute drive and now it's a 3.5-hour drive.
Wow.
So we just make the most of it. We end up like taking silly pictures every week, racing down the hallway on a rolly chair, just like all sorts of fun stuff. So yeah, it's been a long road, but we're trying to make the most of it, even if we have to spend a lot of time at the hospital. So
what is your official diagnosis?
My official diagnosis is stage 3C ovarian cancer. And if listeners want to get more specific, it's high and low grade serous ovarian cancer, which means I kind of have 2 types, which makes me even more rare. So it's not a normal kind, but like a more prevalent kind in ovarian cancer. But I was diagnosed at 27. Most are diagnosed a lot older, and most have high or low, and I have both, which is why it's being really stubborn. So
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that come to mind is you're describing this journey of from when you first found out and then you do treatment and those weeks, weeks of, okay, I don't feel good. And it's funny because when you talk about the story, it's easy to kind of walk through like, and then they said, come back in 3, but I'm just like putting myself in 3 weeks is, it's fast, but then it's not. What do those weeks of waiting look like for you? Like, how do you walk through those days when you don't have answers yet? I'm going to have scans, but it's not. Because I'll be real, I'm such an impatient person. Like when I know something's up, I'm like, no, like let's for
sure.
I want to know what I'm dealing with here. And to have them look at you and be like, okay, we'll let you know in a month. And I know that there is this thing called hospital time that exists that is like no other time. And like real talk, it's awful. It's awful when you're at the hospital and even when you're a stat, sometimes stat is like in 8 hours later, like,
yes. And things kind of move in slow motion. It's like, whoa.
Yes.
Scanxiety is a real thing. It's just constant, there is not a day that goes by that I have longer than 10 minutes without thinking about this. My team retreat in Park City this past weekend, and then when my husband and I like go hiking, those have been the only times where I can go extended periods of time without thinking about this. And so those weeks of waiting in between, oh my gosh, it's hard. And then it also becomes this like really sweet time with Jesus too. Because I just sit there and I'm like, I can't get through this. Like, how am I going to make it to the next appointment? Or how am I going to get sick between now and the next appointment? Am I going to wake up in the middle of the night in pain again? Like, what is the next scan going to say? Is my blood draw going to be okay? And it's taught me to cling to Jesus, because there's literally nothing else you can do. No amount of worry, no amount of even doing anything, no amount of workout, no amount of whatever is going to take it away or make it any better or change anything, but God can.
What does clinging to Jesus look like for you? Like, just practically speaking.
Yeah. Because I know me before, it was like, oh yeah, cling to Jesus, like pray a couple times. I don't know. And for me to really like put practical things into place every day has made a huge difference. So wake up in the morning, first thing I do, Bible study. Like I read Jesus Calling every morning, whatever Bible study I have to be doing at the time, and just really read his word. And throughout the day, and then that morning, spend time in prayer. And sometimes that means just sitting in silence and just listening and calming my own thoughts about everything. And honestly, like praying about others too. Like not just focusing on myself, but to have this like list. I have a list in my phone of like these other prayer things. And it's like, that helps me get my mind off of myself, because going through this, it'd be so easy to be just like, all right, heal me. Okay. Give me the strength for today, all this and all about me. But that also gives myself a little bit of anxiety, like thinking about that all the time. So to get my brain off of that, but to still be in communication with the Lord is I feel like so important. And then throughout the day, I listen to podcasts and to like church sermons and worship music and all of that, and just reminding myself to pray a whole lot more often. Whereas before it was just like, okay, do my 5-minute devotional in the morning and then, all right, good for the day. And just to be filling my brain with more of that and keep my focus on that has really made a huge, huge difference. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not immune to panic attacks and to feeling anxious and to all of that. But I think bringing those honest feelings to God and telling him, this is what I'm feeling in this moment, and I can't do this. I think that being honest like that and really being open about it gives God the way to your heart to change that. But it's actually funny that you asked that question about the whole like 3-week waiting thing. I was talking to my husband and I were just recently talking about this, that now that I'm in like monthly treatments versus weekly, it's harder. Like, granted, I feel better physically. Like the weekly treatments, I was knocked on my rear for 6 months solid. And so I didn't feel well at all during that whole time, but it felt like I was like doing something, I'm like, all right, if I can just make it through these 24 weeks, like I can do this. I feel like junk, but it's okay. Like that means it's working. And for me to go to monthly treatments, like I have been since last fall, I'm like, all right, we're not doing enough. And that's really made me rely more on God than on medical treatments.
Wow.
And put my faith in the right thing. Not saying sit back, twiddle my thumbs and just hope it's going to go away. I mean, you've got to do the treatments, but just to really think in perspective of that, of like, okay, I can't put all my trust into this treatment. I've got to put all my trust into God using this treatment. And that's been a really big difference.
Man, I think that truth alone, you could spiritually gut check a lot of people in many arenas of life, as far as that angst we have to feel like we need to do. Someone said this, and it wasn't original to them, but I wrote it down the other day, and I've been repeating it in my mind again and again, is this idea of, do we really believe that the work that God does in us is just as important as the work he does through us? And just that idea of being with God, that trusting in God and not always having to be in the position of doing.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of conviction that you're like, oh, I wish I'd shut my ears right before they said that.
No, I did not hear that.
It's painful, but it's so true and so not natural.
No. And I think one of the big realizations that helped me come to that kind of aha moment was realizing that like the stuff is not just happening to you, it can happen for you, even if it looks really crappy from the outside.
Yeah.
You know, that he's going to bring you through this, but you do have to go through this.
Absolutely. You know? One of the things you said earlier, it's interesting, it brought up this conversation. What you said was really wise. The conversation it brought up in my brain was super shallow, but they do connect.
I'm totally down for that.
But you were talking about describing to your friends who were like, why would you still do this coaching thing? And you're like, you know, when you are battling things like cancer, you're going through these things, like doing something with purpose. Like that's such a great distraction. And a friend of mine was Voxing. I don't know if you use Voxer. I
haven't, but I've heard I should. So I might
download it. Girl, we can be real life friends on Voxer. Okay.
Let's do it.
So my friend was Voxing me, and in the middle of the conversation, like her talking, she's like, she kind of paused for like a long moment. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just got distracted driving. And I was laughing, and I messaged her back, and I was like, I think it's funny that you see driving as the distraction and you messaging me as the priority. I was like, because I think what actually happened there was you were distracted from what you should have been focused on. But I was thinking, as you're saying that, I'm like, how much the enemy loves to, whether it's cancer or other things, is the purpose, what God has designed us for, the things that he puts in front of us being the focus. And he loves to distract us with things that can very easily, we shift that. What is the thing that we're actually supposed to be doing? And what is the distraction here? And sometimes something as big, and I don't mean to like downplay cancer whatsoever, like don't hear me wrong, but something that massive that easily you could be like, girl, this is all you can focus on. Like you're fighting for your life. And nobody would argue that that's a legitimate like life focus. Right. But for you to turn that on its head and be like, actually, this is not my focus. I'm going to focus on my purpose and not allow this to become a distraction. Like we're going to shift this back around, you know, like for her, let's drive and then maybe message later. Like, but yeah, for you to just continue on. And I just think it's one of the things that drew me to your story is your story. It doesn't align from human, like, you know, perspective as far as what you would think. Now that listeners have heard your words, they need to go find you on Instagram and just honestly comment like, okay, I look at you and I don't think this woman has been fighting for her life. She's been in this really long. That's not to say that, like, obviously this is hard and you face hard days and you're not being inauthentic on your Instagram. But what you've managed to do is flip this thing around and be like, you know what? Cancer could easily distract you from what God has placed me here to do. And cancer is a part of my story, but it's not my whole story. Exactly. Like there is more to me. And that is everything I love about your Instagram and who you are is your life screams that. Like Thank you. God is bigger than everything that I'm going through right now.
Yes. So. Yeah. No, and I love that. I think that's been something that I've been, you know, pretty intentional about, was just not giving cancer more power than it's already trying to have, you know? And if I made that my focus and that just my number one thing, because it tries real dang hard to be my number one thing every single day. Like I said, most days I don't go longer than 5 minutes without thinking about it. But why give it more than it deserves? We're going to make our focus something else.
Yeah.
And not forget that there is a bigger purpose than just me surviving cancer. I really want to outlive it even while I have it. You know? Well,
I am emotionally, even as I say this, but I applaud you because you're doing that.
Yeah.
You're doing it. And it's powerful for someone who's not even battling cancer, but just everyday life to be, you know. And that's it. It's true. Everybody has stuff. So even for listeners, like cancer doesn't have to be your thing, but I guarantee you, we have an enemy that has a whole tool chest full of things he would love to become bigger
Yes.
than what God has called us, the race he's placed in front of us. And I just think I love coming across people that you're like, oh, I love it when God's winning. Like, there's just something about it that inspires you to be like, I want my life to be one that people look and be like, God won. Like, he just won in that life. It was a battle, and it was sometimes a bloodbath, but he still won.
Yes. And he will win every time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Time. Yes.
Well, man, we could talk forever, but I obviously, my producer will give me the, you really need to watch the clock, babe. You get a little carried away.
Yeah.
He calls me babe because he's married to me. I'm not inappropriately close to my producer.
You're like, it's fine. It's okay.
It's fine. It's totally normal.
Oh my gosh.
I do have one more question for you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's important. I feel like I just need to know this. Because I'm sitting here just enthralled by, gosh, I love you, and so many things about your life are amazing. But what I really need to know is, what is the most superficial thing about you?
So you're going to laugh at my answer because it doesn't apply today, literally. But the most superficial thing about me is that I am obsessed with my false eyelashes. I don't have any on today because I rubbed them off yesterday. It was about time for those puppies to go. But I started doing them when I came home from the hospital, actually. And I think they're like losing my hair and going bald and feeling a little bit like, you know, a 12-year-old boy, or as my hair grows out, I feel a little bit like Justin Bieber a little bit. So for me to have on like girly eyelashes, I'm like, okay, still a 28-year-old female. It's all good. And for the days that I don't feel like putting on makeup, I can still feel girly. So yes.
You do the legit extensions where they like attach them?
Oh yeah. I get trusted with like eyelashes and like glue and sticky stuff around my eyeballs. That would not end well. I don't need another ER visit. So I have my friend who has a salon do them.
I've had them done once and I loved them. Yeah. My one thing with them, and I really need to get over it, is I am a rub my eyes like to a fault. And you can't like rub your eyes with that. Like, no,
that will literally murder your eyeballs.
Yes. Yeah, seriously. And I felt like I kept like going to do it and was, oh no, don't touch my eyes. And so by the time it was ready for them to come off, I was kind of ready for, like, I wanted the look of them, but I could no longer handle the feel of, like, I just once wanted to be able to sleepy rub my eyes like a child. And I wonder if I should just take a day break from them and be like a baby all day and rub my eyes, and then the next day go put them back on.
Right. I know. That was one thing I had to get used to also. But yeah.
There's something to be said about waking up and being like, bam, there they are.
Like, I woke up like this, you know?
Seriously. Seriously. Maybe you're born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline or
false eyelashes.
Yeah.
We know. There's no way to tell. But now everybody knows my secrets. So now they do know.
We're known for outing people on their beauty secrets. Oh, well, gosh, this has been such a gift. Brittany, you're a special person. I'm sure that you hear that a lot. You better hear that a lot. It sounds like your husband is kind of amazing. And so
beyond amazing.
I'm assuming
if you think I'm cool, I mean, he's really cool. So
maybe he should be my next interview. We need another dude on the podcast.
I should totally do that. Fuck him a little bit.
That would be amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to continuing to stalk you like a creep. But girl, if you get Voxer, it doesn't have to be stalked. We can have small conversations throughout the day.
I'm gonna download it once I get off here.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
All right, girls, that was Brittany. And I have to say, to date, this is one of the most powerful conversations I've been able to have with someone that I've never met before, and for her to just be so vulnerable and sharing her story and just the reality of what she's facing right now. Talking to Laurie a little bit earlier, the word perspective came to mind because we're like, we go through stuff every single day. We have hard things that we face. But when you have conversations with someone who's literally like their every day is they are fighting for their life, it does bring perspective to your own life. Like, okay, what are the things that I get frustrated about that are really worth my frustration? And what things have I just kind of lost my perspective on things and I need to shift focus here? And so one of the things that we talked about in the interview was how she found out about this cancer diagnosis and she was doing this Beachbody coaching, which she does an incredible job. And her friends really kind of questioning, okay, why are you doing this? Like you have cancer, you have this fight in front of you, and then you're kind of have this distraction or this whole fitness thing going on in the midst of it. And she talked about like, it's nice to have this distraction from what could otherwise totally be overwhelming, basically be everything that I think about and whatever. And so we talked about this, how the enemy can often do that in life where we almost flip what is to be our focus and what is a distraction. And by that, I mean, you know, when you look at her, you think, or when her friends were looking, they thought, well, cancer obviously would be your focus because you need to focus on this to fight this battle. And so everything else is this distraction. And rather than that, she's like, no, I'm focusing on this call and this, not even just this job, but this ministry that God has in front of me and not letting cancer be the distraction. Like, yes, it's a part of my story, but it's not the whole story. And so we talked about this idea of what does that look like in our own lives when we have things that, you know, the enemy likes to bring into our lives that we get too focused on. And the things that God has for us to actually focus on, they almost get pushed to the side or we get distracted from them. And so I think not just with cancer, but so many things in life that can become true where my family right now, my husband and my kids and this house, these are the things that God's called me to right now. And I can very easily get caught up in other things outside of my home. And when I get so caught up and distracted by other things, it's almost like this becomes a nuisance, like versus being the focus that it's supposed to be. I don't even know if that makes sense. But
it does. I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that. And when we're running our race in our place, of course, it's good to have a long-term goal and a vision. And, you know, cancer's a long time battle. But by having that balance of fitness, she's able to just take each day and have that like smaller purpose, that limited time. Like today, at least I can go to work and make a difference. And, you know, next week, 3 months from now, I'll still be, you know, on my journey of battling cancer. But today is one day.
I'm trying to think of, I'm going to totally mess up the quote on this, but she talked about not giving cancer more power than it's already demanded in her life. And also not, I think the things that come into our life, there are some things that we cannot control, like hard things that come into our life that we can't control. But the thing that we are able to, and I don't like the word control, but we're able to somewhat influence is how much attention we give them and how much focus we give them. And for her to be just so intentional in the other direction, if you go on her Instagram, and she actually talks about this in her interview, the intentionality that her husband and her have put into even making their treatment something that is a joyful time, something that would otherwise just be, if you think about it, a crazy long drive, a lot of hours of waiting, painful, uncomfortable tests, and they've gone and swung the pendulum. And she said it at the beginning, the one thing that I was like, listen, this can rob a lot of things from me. It could take my hair, my health, everything else, but I will not let it take my joy. And how they've been really intentional in that, I just love, and you see it. I was just looking because I was kind of showing you some of her Instagram pictures of her at the hospital with her husband. They always do these crazy, hilarious poses where, like, one of them, she has like a Superman cape and she's literally holding like the cancer treatment thing that she has as a drink. And she's like, yeah, this is my kryptonite. Like, I'm Superman, and some of them is her like pretending to give a shot to her husband. Like, they just are, they do fun. Yeah, crazy fun things. And it's, for anyone to live life with that kind of intentionality, like, at least for me, I was so challenged that, God, it doesn't need to be a cancer diagnosis in my life to kind of wake me up to just the daily battle of keeping my eyes fixed on you, choosing joy even in hard things. Like, and I don't mean fa la la, silver lining all the time, but I just mean legitimately looking for God in things and searching him out.
I'm reading this book right now, When Changing Nothing Changes Everything. And they talk about an agogic moment. It's like AGOGIC, I think. I never heard of it. But it's these moments in our lives where we do feel that, like, perspective or that wake-up call. And yeah, sometimes it's, news of a loved one or yourself and a health issue. Sometimes it's you driving by the mountains and just being like, wow, like, what am I doing? What has God called me to do? And I highlighted that word. I'm going to try to drop it in sentences. I'm not even sure if it's a real word or if the author made it up. But
no one will know. You can just say it with confidence.
Yeah, no, I hope that our listeners have this agogic moment when they listen to this story and the other ones on Hey Girl, of just like, wow, that hit my heart, and it makes, us want to change for the better and put things in perspective.
It's almost something you want to pray for every single day.
Yes.
God, just awaken, not even just to life itself, but to you. Yes. Awaken myself to you, to just this awareness of what you're doing around me, and help me to engage in my life. Because I know for me, if I'm not intentional with my life, I very quickly go into autopilot mode where I almost just am going through the motions, but it's almost like my soul feels numb. Like it's just doing the everyday, especially in this season of life where some of my everyday is mundane, like driving kids back and forth to school, cleaning the house, feeding the dog, like doing all of these things. But what does it look like to actually force myself awake, even in the mundane things? Like, what I play on the radio or on my phone when I'm in the car driving my kids places. Like, what am I cranking, playing, thinking about, whatever, while I'm cleaning my house? Mm-hmm. And I think that there are ways that every single one of us can take this from Brittany's life, like not just be inspired, but really let it be something that stirs a desire for us to change and do this in our own lives. So I don't know, I'm going to take that this week and just think about it. Like, What does that look like every day for me? And what are the places in my day that I am, quote unquote, sleeping, as far as just doing and not really engaging?
Yeah,
so
I'm writing down, I want to pray for an agogic moment every day. Like, if I pray for it, I feel like I'm more going to set myself up for success.
Yeah.
And not just be like, oh, that happens. Yeah, every few months I kind of had that aha. But like, no, every day. And then number 2, to your earlier point, I want to think about things in my life that are difficult. And I'm not going for, cancer treatments, so mine are much smaller things, but how can I make them more fun? So if I, dread, going to doctor's appointments because they're out of the way and, a checkup, like, how do I maybe treat myself with, like, a milkshake after, or play really funny music on the way? Like, what are those things in your life that you kind of don't look forward to, and how can we be like, no, every day is a gift, our time is a gift, let's make the hard things more fun.
Love it. All right, Brittany was just a favorite. I love her. And every single person listening, if you haven't already, go find her on Instagram, follow her account, follow the story. I'm telling you, the things that she posts, it is the perfect balance of really just deep and feeds your spirit. Like, I don't know, it just is so encouraging. and it's honest and it's vulnerable. But then I also love, and this is probably why I connected with her in a special way, is she also has that side of her that's just fun and spunky and sassy or whatever, which I just love. I love. So it's been awesome. Laurie, I'm really excited for you to drop this word throughout the week. You're going to have to check in, or maybe in like a few episodes in advance, you'll just randomly start.
It reminds me of the movie Clueless when they try to learn like a new big word every week, and it's like sporadic. Just try to use it in a sentence. Girls, agogic. Just try to use it in a sentence.
There you go. This is our tip of the day. Throw it in a sentence. See what happens. All right, listeners, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for listening to yet another story. We just want to encourage you, no matter where you're at, no matter what race you're running, hopefully your own race. Run your race in your place. Keep being awesome for Jesus. We'll see you next week.
Boom. Let's imagine I've never met Brittany Crosby, and I want a snapshot into her life. Bethany.
Sorry. It's not much of an imagination because you haven't actually met Brittany Crosby.
Rude. This better not go in the bloopers. Oh wait, I actually haven't met her. Let's imagine.
Okay, just and go.
Oh wait, now?
This is going to be a strong recording sesh.
Hold
I
on.
can tell.